The Fantasy Skirmisher.
I came back from vacation a little bit ago, and to my surprise, there were 3 packages waiting for me. The first one was Thieves World Book 2, which I will not be covering on the channel. And I received 2d6 Dungeon with the game cards and the books, and looks like a little bookmarker which has charts on it. I look forward to getting into that, and I will be covering that game on the channel. But the one I'm covering today is Random Quest. It is a dungeon dive, and as the title says, it is random. So let's quickly take a look at what's inside the box. First, we have a tuck box, which is, you fold up, which holds these cards here, which they fit quite snugly. The first group of cards are gameplay charts. So you have cards and charts for traps and tricks, which I've learned are quite deadly, which we'll go over. There's cards for magic, arcane, and divine magic. Reaction to fire if you or a monster is on fire. Treasure table, monster reaction for parlay, and also challenges that you may need to overcome. One thing I like about the feature is that some monsters you can speak to and try to get out of combat by talking to them. And there's the monster reaction card. So when you about to initiate combat, you choose an action, and then you roll on this table here to determine what the monster's reaction is. And we'll cover combat more. And then, of course, the contents of the dungeon card. So when you enter a dungeon, an area of the dungeon, you roll to see what's in there. All right, now speaking of dungeons, the artwork is fantastic, as you can see. I just love the old school black and white artwork because, well, I'm old school. It's what I grew up with. But you can see there's a nice variety of artwork. Lots of different rooms and corridors and chasms and little bridges. And so we'll be covering some of that as well, as far as how to navigate all that. But as you can see, the artwork is very nice. And then we've got the monster cards. Speaking of nice artwork, I mean, just check out those orcs. So we've got a nice variety of monsters. Got Medusa here, zombies, carrion crawlers, a huge scorpion. Got more orcs, ghouls, bats, giant spiders, lizardmen, zombies, minotaurs, jellies, a flind, huge scorpion, giant ants, skeletons, a quaggoth. So you can see, it does have a really good variety and just really nice artwork. And we'll go over those cards in a little bit. Then you get 3 dice. You get a pawn to represent your character, which you can replace, of course, with a mini. There's a little piece of errata inside the bag here for the spell Lightning Bolt, on how that works. Then you've got your rule book. You've got items in standard and magical. This has a list of all the items you could buy at the town of Riverwell. And then just some useful play summary information. Then you've got a couple of sheets. I've got a tracking sheet for your turns for the number of monsters you defeated, the initiative, the rounds, any miscellaneous items or notes that you need to take. And then, of course, the character sheets. So that is the contents of Random Quest. Before you can begin play, you must create a character. So using the character sheet here, I created a warrior named Bestek. And the first thing you do is you roll 3d6 5 times and write down the results, the totals, on a piece of scratch paper. Then what you'll do is you will assign those totals to one of 5 attributes: combat, agility, health, knowledge, personality. And then what you'll do is you'll divvy up those attributes into sub-abilities. The sub-abilities for combat is melee and ranged. For agility, it's dodge and acrobatics. For health, it's resistance and restorative. And for knowledge, it's esoteric and cunning. And for personality, it's acting and persuasion. So what you do is, for example, combat, I assign 8 points for melee, 4 points for range, which equals the total of 12 for my attribute. And also there's a chart in the rules where you may get a positive or a negative modifier for your sub-abilities depending on what it is. So for example, my melee of 8 gave me a +2 modifier for a total of 10. So that means that on 2 dice, when I roll for combat, when I roll to hit, I must roll a 10 or lower. So it'll be pretty easy for me to hit in melee combat. Ranged, as you can see, would be less so. And so after you do that, there is an option to roll to see if you can get a boon. But in most cases, you'll probably get a bane, like a negative personality attribute. I happened to get lucky and rolled a boon, and I rolled weapons, which gives me +1 to melee. So actually, I should write that down here, +1 again, so I have a total of 11. So my melee goes to 11. All right, so then what you do is you calculate your health. The total health is where I'm, mark down how many hit points I have left, and also your total dodge score. So my dodge is 5, plus I got 1 for a shield that I purchased, +1 for a total of 6 dodge. And what you do is roll for gold pieces, and then you go to the store to purchase items. Now, here are the items. It's broken down to melee weapons, ranged weapons, potions, other equipment, scrolls, and rods. I rolled and got 54 gold pieces, so that allowed me to get a class 2 damage 1d6 weapon, which is a short sword, spear, or mace. Those are examples. So for me, my character has a short sword and a shield, and also a large backpack, healing potion, water skins, rations, rope, a grappling hook, a med kit. The potion of invisibility and the 2 keys were actually treasures that I found on my last adventure before I died. But you can see how much each item costs. But one thing that I think is cool about the rules here is that you have to negotiate with the shopkeeper in Riverwell. So to do that, you need to roll on your acting. If you roll less, equal to or less on your acting, you get a 25% discount on that item. If you roll over, it's 25% more. Now my acting is 3. I got a -1 modifier here, so it's very difficult for me to get a discount, yet alone the regular listed price here. So I was having to pay, for most items, not all, 25% more than what was listed. And there are some rules that I don't recall exactly, but there are some situations where you would not use the sub-ability modifiers for certain roles. The same goes with selling items. So you say you successfully come out of a dungeon, you got some treasures you want to sell for gold, so you can purchase other items. You can negotiate prices along the same way as well. Now there are several classes you could choose from, but they all have requisites. And the one I chose was Warrior. I rolled 12 on one of my 5 rolls, and I have a health of 10, so I make the requisites to choose Warrior. And you can see for Wizard, all the primary attributes are a roll of 12, as you can see here. And then you have a secondary, which are all 9. So Warrior is Combat 12, Health 9. Wizard is Knowledge 12, Agility 9, so on and so forth for the Priest and for the Thief. Now there is a unclass or an apprentice where there's no requisites. So if I rolled an 11, not a 12, then I would not have been able to be a warrior, so I would be an apprentice, which has no special abilities. Now, you can see here that the wizard obviously has spells. There's priests, which have different special abilities. The thief has most, which has kind of the classic thief skills. Moving silently, disarming traps, finding them, opening locks, hiding in shadows, climbing, backstabbing, and dual wield, which several characters have, such as the thief, the wizard, as well as the warrior. And that allows you to utilize 2 weapons. One is class 1, other is class 2. Class 1 would be a dagger. The other item could be, like, say, your short sword or your mace. To start the game, you draw a dungeon card. This will be your starting card here. and you put your pawn on it. That is your location. And then what you do is determine what the contents of the card is. So here we go, using our chart. Whoop, we roll a D3, 6, and I've got a 10. The 10 is a door in monster with treasure. All right, so that's a good example. So the first thing we need to do is determine, is the door locked and is the door trapped? All right, so let's go ahead and open this up here. So for doors and chests, we roll 2d6. If it's less than or equal to 7, it's locked. If it's equal to or less than 4, it is trapped. So let's take a look here. All right, so we rolled a 6, and so the door is locked. Now let's determine if the door is also trapped. It is not trapped. Okay, so to be able to unlock the door, there's a few ways that we could do that. If we had a key, which I don't, at least for this example, I could automatically unlock it. But I could also attempt to pry the door open. So to pry the door open, I roll a 2d6. If I get less than 5, it's a success. All right, so I'm going to try to roll the door open with my sword, my blade, and I rolled an 8. So I failed. Now, I am going to try to force the door, and I get 2 attempts to do this. But the downside is that there's a 4 in 6 chance of a wandering monster showing up. That would be on top of the monster that's already going to be there. All right, so this could be another short game for me. All right, so I'm going to roll 2d6 versus my melee. Easily succeeded because my melee is 8. And so therefore, I was able to pry that door open. So now I need to roll the die to see if there is a monster, a wandering monster. I roll the die, and it is a 5. So there's no wandering monster, because 1 to 4 would be wandering monster, 5, 6, none. But I still have monsters to contend with, because this was a door and a monster that does have a treasure. So we're going to draw the monster, and the monster are giant rats. So let's take a look at what a monster card looks like. The heart icon is the number of health that each rat has, and yes, there's more than one rat. Their attack value, their dodge value, their resist value. So dodge is dodging your melee or ranged attacks. Resist is magic attacks. And if they do hit you, they bite for 1d3 damage. But as you can see here, when bitten, there's a slim chance, 2 in 12, the PC will be stricken with a disease. So you would see the sickly bane in boons and banes if you fail the resist roll. Each bite from the rats will have some chance to cause disease. A cure disease spell is needed to nullify. All right, so we have, since this is a basic dungeon, 6 giant rats that we need to defeat before we could clear this part of the dungeon and move on to the next. So how combat works is that the first thing you need to do is determine an action, what you are going to do. And you do this before you randomly roll what the creatures or the monsters' reaction is going to be. So your action is, choices are hold. If you hold, you lose the action that round, but you win the initiative for the next round. Then you take cover is another one. You lose your action, but you get a +2 to dodge this round, and +1 to ranged attack next round. All right, then you could parlay, but we cannot parlay or try to talk to the animals or the monsters because they cannot speak. You could choose to retreat. You enter an adjacent dungeon card. There's a 3 in 6 chance the monster will pursue. Or you could flee. Enter an adjacent dungeon card. There's a free monster attack with at +1 for the PCs The PC's dodge is -1, and there's a 1 in 6 chance the player character or you will drop an item, but the monster will not pursue. And then the most common one I think would be attack, which is something that we're going to do right now. So I am going to choose to attack the monster. Now what is the monster going to do? So the giant rats, they act as a unit, as the rules say. So they're all going to do the same thing when we roll. And so we roll a 15. The rats are uncertain. They're confused and lose initiative and attacks. So they don't do anything this turn, which is fantastic. We get a free attack. So what you do is that I need to roll an 11 or lower to hit. So that's going to be really easy. 5, so I certainly hit. Now the rat that I am attacking has a dodge of 5, so he has a chance to dodge my hit. So on 2 dice needs to roll a 5 or less, which he did, so I missed because the rat dodged. All right, now we move on to round 2. So I'm going to choose to attack again. The monster's reaction is going to be 10, immediate attack. So it looks like they automatically got the initiative because they're attacking immediately. So they are going to attack me 6 times because there's 6 rats. So I rolled 2 dice on the first one. So got a 10, so that is clearly a miss because I need to roll a 4 or less. So that's 1, another miss, 5, another miss, got 3 more. Another miss, that was a 5. Another miss, oh thank goodness. And another miss. So all the rats missed me. Now it's my turn. So I am going to roll. I hit. The rat is going to try to dodge. Rolled a 6, so missed the dodge. So now I'm going to roll 1d6, which is my longsword's attack power. Longsword is 1d6 to determine what the damage is. And I rolled a 4. So the rat's health is 3. So I killed 1 rat. So 1 rat down, 5 more to go. And then just wash, rinse, repeat. So again, what you do is determine your action, determine the monster's reaction. Then you would roll for initiative, which we did not do because of the reactions. And then whoever rolls highest on the d6 goes first. If it's a tie, it's simultaneous. And you keep going until either you decide to, get the heck out of dodge and choose your retreat or flee action, or you kill all the monsters, or they kill you. Now let's just say, for example, for all intents and purposes, I was able to kill all the rats. So now they had a treasure in their little rat's nest. So I'm going to roll on that. And I rolled an 8. An 8 is a ring of protection. It gives me +1 to dodge and resistance. Thank goodness. Now, one thing I'm not sure of is that +1 to dodge or resistance. I would think it would say or. But I think for this, it's both. So that's how I'm interpreting it, and that's what I'm going with. So then I would write it down and put it in my list of equipment. All right, so that card is considered resolve. So we would move on to the next one. You move your token and roll on the contents of the dungeon card. So the contents would be, there's a magical light, roll d6, odd as bane, even as boon. Interesting, that's a 3. Unoccupied with 1 item. So you'd roll a 1d3, it could either be a dagger, mirror, or a key, which is 1 use. A door and a monster with treasure, treasure chest, door trap, so on and so forth. There's also challenges that you may encounter. And if you recall, there is a card where you would roll on what the challenge would be. Now, let's talk about traps. So there's lots of interesting traps The one that seems to get me is the pits, because you cannot try to dodge or avoid them. If you run into a pit in a trap, for example, 17, which I did one game, it's a 20-foot fall, 2d6 damage. You get 1d6 damage for every 10 feet you fall. So here, 2d6 damage. I rolled an 11, which pretty much almost killed me. And when you fall into a pit, you have to climb out, but you have to roll against your ability. So I think it's the acrobatics ability. And so if you fail that, well, you fall and you take more damage. So in one pit, I rolled and succeeded climbing the first 10 feet. Then the second 10 feet, I failed. So I fell 20 feet, rolled 2d6 damage, and was killed. I had a dungeon quest moment where my game lasted one turn, and that is because my first card, I rolled a poison spike pit, only 10 feet, 1d6 damage, right? But I had to succeed in my resist roll or die. Well, I failed my resist roll. My resist roll was 5. I scored higher than that. I rolled higher than that. I failed and was dead on the first turn. So you can rack up some hits pretty quickly in this game and die. So it really behooves of you to have healing potions, which healing potions have 2 use, and also a med kit. So you need that time to be able to try to get health points back. Also, you're allowed once per game, once per dungeon level, to leave the dungeon, backtrack out, go to the town of Riverwell, and you get a free stay at the inn, which restores all of your health. You could also try to rest in the dungeon, but that runs a risk of encountering a wandering monster before you're able to heal. So that's kind of risky, which is kind of cool. All right, now we need to talk about the rest of the traps, which I almost forgot because I was so focused on those darn pits, which it killed me a couple of times. So for all the other types of traps, you can avoid them, and you have to make 2 rolls. First, you need to detect them, and what you would do is you would roll against your sub-ability of cunning. So my cunning was 5, so if I rolled a 5 or less on 2d6, I would be able to detect that trap. And then I would go on to the next step of my ability, and that is try to disarm it. Again, rolling 2d6 against my acrobatics skill. If I fail in either one, the trap springs and I got to suffer the consequences. But if I succeed in both, then I've been able to successfully disarm that trap. So anyway, this is a deadly dungeon. In my first game, I was exploring a lot of the dungeon and was not able to find a single monster. It was the traps that killed me, and in the very end, it was that pit, then trying to climb out of it. My second game was a one-turn. Well, I died on turn 2 because that one was a poison spike trap. There was no monsters exploring that one. And then in game 3, just like what happened is I rolled a door which happened to be trapped, which I triggered and was damaged, and then got the rats, which did me in. I just got overwhelmed and they killed me. So I'm 0 for 3 as far as this game is concerned. Did I have fun playing it? Yes, I did have fun playing it. And I want to play it again. Did the game frustrate me? Yes, it did. This is a fun game. It's a good game. It's not a great game by any means. And I'm going to talk about some of my thoughts. Now, let's talk about the rulebook. Obviously, kind of you make or break a game by the rules, right? And I think there are good bones, to this system. I like the combat system. I like the boons and the banes, the character creation. It definitely has that RPG feel to it in creating them. I like the fact that you could talk to monsters as opposed to trying to just constantly fight them. But this rule book is driving me a little bit nuts. As you can see, there's no margins. and it's really text heavy, so I kind of found it to be difficult to read. And after the first few pages, it's just strictly all text. And I found myself having to constantly go back into the rules to try to figure out how to do something. And sometimes it was there, sometimes it was not, and I had to figure out how to do something on my own. The rules pretty much end, well, there's no page number, so I can't tell you how many pages of rules there are. But midway through the book is the character creation, and after character creation are the variations to gameplay. So there is a variation where you could do the traps challenge option. So instead of defeating only monsters, discovering and successfully avoiding or disarming 3 traps or overcoming challenges can count as 1 monster. I think that is the way in the future that I am going to go, because like I said in my first game, I explored a lot of the dungeon and did not roll a single monster to come up. And so I think I'm going to do that in the future. It does come up with a nice glossary. It does not always have everything that you may look for, and some of the descriptions may not explain appropriately how to do a certain thing. The other issue I have with this rule book is that it really lacks examples of play. The most comprehensive one is here under challenges, climbing, and pits, as you can see right here. And this is an example of doing something that is not in the rules. So you come across a crevice, one of those cards that has the crevice, and well, there's no really rules on how to overcome that, but yeah, there is here. You secure a rope bridge, and so you roll on a couple of your sub-abilities and see if you could overcome that, and if you don't, you fall. And that's the example here, but it's not clear in the rules how you would handle that type of terrain situation. So you just kind of got to make it up as you go. But that's not the case with block passages, and those are the cards that have, let's take a look at the cards that have like avalanches. Oh yeah, like right here. So it does have rules for overcoming block passages, and then what happens if you fall. So these things are covered, but the first couple games I was kind of looking a lot in the rules, as well as this little handout sheet, just to make sure I was doing things correctly. And if I couldn't figure it out or wasn't in the rules, I just have to figure it out for myself, and that seemed to be fine. The other thing about the rule book here is some of the holes that I noticed. In combat, it took me a little while to kind of figure it out. I just wish it could be a little more clear as far as step 1, step 2, step 3. But it does cover how combat works. It doesn't really appropriately address for me how the number of monsters are handled. And so if, for example, in that example, I defeated all 6 of those giant rats, that would count as 1 monster as far as the 4 monsters I need to defeat to clear the dungeon and win the game as far as that 1 dungeon. But it's not clearly explained in here. But it is, I found in Board Game Geek. So that was answered like 4 months ago, I guess, with the print and play edition. The other thing I just really scratched my head over was when I was buying equipment. And there is a couple items. Got a backpack and a small sack. So the backpack carries 2,000 gold pieces / 20 pounds, or 500 gold pieces, 5 pounds. But all the items do not have the weight. And so I think maybe that the pounds was something in maybe in a prototype edition when they were developing the game, the designers developing the game, but it's not listed here, so really don't know what to do with the backpack other than hold gold pieces. So encumbrance is hinted at here, but it's not addressed. So I think there should be an encumbrance rule, how many things you could carry. That's pretty basic. You can have, you could wear one helmet, you can't wear two, obviously. Same with armor, boots, so on and so forth. But it would be nice if this encumbrance was addressed so you knew exactly what you could put in your backpack or small sack. So my thought, about this is maybe instead of having pounds, you could have, for example, a weight number, like maybe 1 through 4. And so they add up to a certain number, like 20 or to pounds. So for example, a med kit, that would be like weight 1 or encumbrance 1 or something like that. And then you could put, theoretically, in a backpack, 20 med kits in there, because that would equal 20. So that way you kind of keep it simple by just assigning a number 1 through 4 and have it add up to a total that the backpack or the sack could carry. So I think that is probably some home brewed rules that I will do, because I do think what I want to do is create a 1-page summary sheet that is just spelled out and more clear on how to address certain things. Because the sequence of play is quite simple. Draw a dungeon card, put your token on it, roll to see what's on there, and then resolve it. Whether it's locks, traps, monsters, things like that. So it's pretty straightforward, but there's just lots of little niggling questions, which I think could be tighter here in the rule book with more examples. And one place which would have been great for that is the items in standard and magical. So you've got some great artwork here, pointing to Riverwell, the town. You've got the items, you've got kind of a basic rule summary. The back page is blank. Why is that blank? I think this would be a great place for a detailed example of play where you're playing through several different cards, encountering environmental challenges such as chasms, how that would be handled in the game, as well as blocked passages, defeating monsters, groups of monsters, things like that. I think if I had that detailed example of play which went through a few different cards and showed how that was handled, I would have picked up on this game much more quickly and would not have had to try to go through these rules here. All right, so again, a good game. Not a great game, but it's really a good game. I think it's got good bones. And if you're the type of person who doesn't mind making up stuff on the fly and being your own DM per se, I think you might enjoy this. I do plan to play this more in the future, and like I said, with my rule summary. And also this box, as you could see, there was a lot of empty space in here. So I thought, hey, this is a place where maybe I could put my 2d6 dungeon. Unfortunately, it does not quite fit. But other small games such as Tin Helm, Gate with the Gates expansion, things like that, that would easily fit in with this game. So you could store a lot of your other small fantasy games in this one box. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.